back here in Phil Schreier's office here at the National Firearms Museum. Phil, being senior curator here, has snuck us first into the vault, now into his office. And Phil, we've been talking in these segments of the Curator's Corner some great history, a lot of great history and stories of General George S. Patton, and we have a Patton triple play this week, which I love. Tell us a little bit about what we have this week.
Well, thank you, John, for having us on the show. As always, you know, we've been talking about General George S. Patton Jr. and some of the different types of firearms he had. Again, we don't actually have an original Patton firearm in the museum. Most of those are on public display at the George S. Patton Museum of Cavalry and Armor at Fort Knox, Kentucky. But we have a number of the types of guns that Patton had, and of course, in displaying these, the stories that go with them are great. And with Patton, every day was a great story. What a tremendous life that he led, and he was really a gun guy that knew his stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, of course, we're all familiar with the ivory-handled revolvers that he wore.
Right.
In fact, he made a number of mentions in various letters and talking with others that he preferred the revolver because it had fewer moving parts to jam. That was pretty much a positive thing that the revolver was going to work. The revolvers of the time period, like his single action, were pretty big though, and not easily concealed. And there's a great scene in the movie Patton, 1970, with George C. Scott, where Patton's talking to the RAF Air Marshal, and he assures him that the skies will be clear, that they won't have trouble from Germans attacking his lines anymore. And just then, German Messerschmitts hove into view and start shooting up the Casablanca headquarters of General Patton. He jumps out the window on the roof of a truck onto the ground and stands there in the street and pulls out from his holster a Colt 380 hammerless automatic and starts shooting at the Messerschmitts with that. An amazing scene, not far from the truth. Patton had on him at all times what he called his insurance gun. It was a little concealed gun of some type. He normally carried it in the waistband of his trousers, even when he was wearing the single action in his S.D. Myers belt equipment.
Right. He
usually had another hideout gun on him. And in those rare photographs where you see him in formal occasions where he's not wearing his ivory grip revolvers, he's undoubtedly got one of at least 3 different pistols hiding out on him at some point. And they're photographs of Patton with at least one of each of these types of guns. The first instance was the Colt model in 1908 in 380.
Right.
It was designed by John Browning. It was hammerless. It's very thin, easily concealed. Patton had a beautiful set of ebony grips placed on his and had inlaid stars in ivory into the grips of the 380.
True Patton style.
True Patton style. When he got to 4 stars, though, the grips kind of shattered. They're not in the greatest condition right now. But that was his 380.
Mm-hmm.
In 1943, he and Eisenhower and a number of other general officers were issued from the Army the 32 general officer's pistol that came with a general officer's tongue and wreath belt, similar to his S.D. Myers rig that he had worn previously. And you'll see photographs switching between the S.D. Myers rig and the general officer's rig. For that, he was given the 32 caliber semi-automatic. He is seen in a number of photographs wearing a very interesting variation of the Colt Detective Special in a very cool holster. It's almost a square piece of leather with a belt loop, and then there's a pocket on the outside of the leather, the rectangular piece of leather, that the Detective Special fit into. Patton's Detective Special, unlike this one, was what we call a square butt. You'll see that this one has kind of a rounded butt strap here. Patton's was a square butt. It was a military procured Detective Special. Falls in a special serial number range that was procured by the United States military during World War II. And Patton wore this on the outside of his uniform in an exposed holster in a number of photographs. Lastly is the Remington 51. And this is a really interesting semi-automatic. It was manufactured from, I think, 1916 or 1918 until about 1934. About 65,000 of the Remington were made in .380 and in .32 auto. Patton had been talking to one of his friends, General Keenan Joyce, and he had told Patton that he ought to get a good .380, Remington 51. Well, the gun hadn't been made for almost 10 years. So Patton wrote to his brother-in-law, who contacted Remington. The factory actually got involved in finding a used 51, refurbished it, had an inscription from General Joyce inscribed on the gun, and then sent it to Patton. There's only one photograph that I've found so far showing Patton with the 51, and he's actually wearing it in a clip-on holster in his back pocket of his trousers. You can just see the butt of it sticking out from the back pocket of his trousers. But he called these little 32s, 380s, and 38 specials his insurance guns. If things got down and dirty, that would be probably what would end up being used.
Wow, so cool. How can folks see these particular firearms here at the National Firearms Museum?
These guns are available on display at the National Firearms Museum from 9:30 to 5, 7 days a week, off the Interstate 66 outside of Washington, D.C. Free admission, plenty of parking. Or you can see us 24/7 on the internet at nramuseum.org.
Phil, thank you so much for another fascinating installment of the Curator's Corner.
Thank you, John.